Hi, brothers and sisters. This is Bobby Quitain, and welcome to Pathways of Hope. Today, we want to reflect on the Gospel of John, particularly that episode there where an official asked Jesus to heal his son, and Jesus, complying with him, told him to go home. His son was healed, and when he went home, he found out that his son was indeed healed the moment Jesus said that his son would be healed. What can we learn from this? I remember my son Franco, who has this peculiar ability to pray for people, and when he does pray for people, more often than not, his prayers are answered. So nakakatuwa kasi one time I asked him, like, oh, Franco, how do you pray? And he said to me something very interesting. He said, Papa, when I pray, I become really desperate. I become really desperate when I come to God. And that got me thinking, sabi ko, what does this mean? I believe being desperate in prayer is in some way a key to receiving miracles. Now, before you get me wrong, let me clarify myself. There are many ways of looking at the word despair, especially in a negative way. We could look at it and say, being desperate means being hopeless. That's not what I mean here. Being desperate in prayer doesn't mean you have to be hopeless. Another misconception probably is that being desperate is to do the last resort. No? You've tried everything and this is your last resort. No. Being desperate in prayer, I believe, should not be done out of a last resort. Yung tipong you've done everything, it doesn't work, then you go to prayer. I don't mean it that way as well. What do I mean by being desperate in prayer? Being desperate in prayer means praying, coming to God out of a recognition that you are inadequate to handle the situation, and that you come to God because you realize that He is more than adequate to handle the situation. Again, let me clarify myself. This is not hopelessness, and this is not the last resort. Rather, we look at desperation in prayer in the context of somebody who recognizes his inadequacy, and it pushes him to go to God. I believe this is the kind of desperation that the official in today's gospel had. Why do I say that? Well, one, he was an official, and I'm sure he wouldn't want to be seen with a carpenter from Nazareth begging for his help. And yet on that day, he decided to humble himself and go to Jesus and ask for help. Second, if you look at the passage, it says he begged Jesus to heal his son. He didn't ask. He didn't request. He begged him. That is an act of desperation. Being desperate in prayer doesn't mean hopelessness. It doesn't mean making Jesus as a last resort. No. It means that you recognize how inadequate you are, and it pushes you to go to God. My dear friends, I believe that is a key, one of the keys to receiving a miracle. When you are desperate in prayer, that you come to God and you want to see His power work in your life. In this crisis, I believe we ought to come to the Lord desperately. No, not in hopelessness, not as a last resort, but rather as a recognition of our inadequacy to handle this thing. We will do our part, we will do our best, we will follow the government, scientists will look for a vaccine and a cure, but at the end of the day, we have to recognize that Jesus is the only one who is more than adequate to handle the situation. And so we turn to Him. Our desperation doesn't lead us to hopelessness, but rather it pushes us to turn to Him who is the true source of joy. Now, I'm not saying that all the time miracles will happen or all the time Jesus will answer our prayer. But what does it do? A miracle happens still. Where? In our hearts. when we come to God and we allow ourselves to be drawn to Him out of despair, out of a sense of inadequacy, we then find ourselves more than adequate to handle the situation. Not on our own strength, but on the strength of God. Miracles do happen, but not in the way you expect them to. Be desperate in prayer and see miracles unfold before your very eyes. God bless you.